Hi, everybody. How are you? This is everybody's good and spread out. This is perfect. I'm going to move around a little bit. This presentation I'm about to give, it's actually kind of two in one. I gave this a couple of years ago at our local meeting in Atlanta and expanded it for us here. So it'll feel a little bit different on the back end, but you'll understand what I'm saying in a minute. So the top 5 things that you think your project manager understands about finance and accounting, but doesn't. It's kind of a controversial title, intentionally, I guess. Just very quickly, for my sake, can I get I want to get an idea of who's in the audience. So I understand construction, finance, management. So CFO, anybody just kind of from a title standpoint, CFOs? Okay, controllers, where are you guys? Okay, project accounting or maybe AP, AR, payroll, and then everybody that hasn't raised their hand. Could I just get some shout outs about, if you didn't hear what you do, if you could tell me who else is in the room? I guess you don't work for a construction company, maybe? You're an accountant, maybe, a CPA? CPAs out there? Okay. I know we've got some software professionals out here. I know they're here. I know one's right there. Okay, well, I asked just because I want to acknowledge who's in the room, and I'll explain in a minute here. I'm coming at this from a very unique perspective. I'm not here to tell you necessarily about finance and accounting and things. But I can tell you, because of my background in operations, I can tell you what your operations people think. And I know what they're thinking about and what they know. I lived a lot of years in trailers, arguing with the project accountants, regional finance managers, CFOs, controllers, etc., trying to understand what they knew and what I seem to not know. That's where I'm coming from this, so I just want to make sure you understand that. Little about me. I'm from Lexington, Kentucky.
Okay.
Go Big Blue? Louisville. Okay, that's too bad. Okay, good. The best kind of person from Louisville is a fan of Kentucky. That's the way that works. So I am a UK fan. I did not go to UK. I went to Auburn, War Eagle. Anybody? There we go. I got a construction management degree from Auburn, and I went on the project manager track through our industry and worked a lot of different places. I've got some logos up there. Some of you may remember Beers Construction from Atlanta from a long time ago. They were bought by Skanska. I was working there at the time. Went to work for a company called McDevitt Street. Some of you may know them. They were out of Charlotte. We had offices in Atlanta. They were bought by Bovis, who was then bought by Lend-Lease. So I worked for 3 different companies that all had different names of the same basic company. Oh, I forgot R.W. Allen. I worked for R.W. Allen out of Augusta when I first came out of school. They made a big mistake. They sent me to Atlanta. And then when I went to Augusta, I was like, this isn't as cool as Atlanta. So I changed. I also did some work with Branch Properties. It was known as Highland Properties at the time. My last posting in the industry as a construction professional was with Swinnerton Builders. I ran their office in Atlanta for about 5 years-ish, a little more, a little less. And I've been consulting now for about 6 years-ish. So Ascent Consulting, just to give the quick advertisement, we provide business operations management consulting services to small to mid-size and large, sometimes construction companies. That means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but ultimately we just want them to build a better business. So we have a couple of goals today. These are the goals that we put. I gave them when they asked me to speak and made them sound all fancy and so you can get your credits. And I wanted to make sure that happened. I'm not going to read them to you. That's really not the point. What I want to talk about, really, like I said before, I have a unique perspective. I grew up in the field. The joke is I have a job site trailer MBA. I've been arguing with finance professionals for a long time. And I'll just be really honest a moment. It's because I felt stupid. I knew how to build things. I felt like I was a pretty smart guy. I organized and marshaled large groups of people to herd cats and build a thing that wasn't there yesterday. But when I sat in a trailer, I sat in a meeting and we talked about the gross profit on the project, or we were trying to figure out whatever it was, I didn't feel like I belonged in the room, and it frustrated the daylights out of me. I happen to be one of those people that doesn't like feeling like that, and I like to argue and I like to know why. it took me a long time to figure out some of the things I know, but that's where the perspective comes from. So we're going to talk about a couple different things today. Office versus field culture. What does it look like from the project manager's perspective? So we have a room full of finance professionals, but what does it look like from the project manager's perspective, sitting in the trailer or maybe in the cubicle down the hall, whatever. And then ultimately, what can you do about it? So we're going to set the table by talking about kind of what it feels like. What's the current state? What are you experiencing? And then talk about what it looks like from the other side of the table. And then we're going to talk through some strategies on, well, how can we bridge this gap? What can I do about it at my business? I don't like this office, us versus them thing. I never liked it. What can I do about it? And I can tell you, by the way, with my business, we work all over the country. And we work with small, medium, and large contractors. This is pervasive. The office versus field culture thing exists. It existed for the entire 30 years I was in the field, and I know that it still exists today. It's a personal passion of mine. I kind of mentioned that a minute ago, that it frustrated me for years. So it's a passion of mine in this business to try to bridge that gap as much as I possibly can. So I guess before I jump in here, I've got this little thing down here at the bottom about project management and accounting aren't adversaries. I think we know this, right? Everybody sitting here objectively understands we're all on the same team. We work for the same company. Of course, we're on the same team. We shouldn't be adversaries, yet we are. And I think a large part of that, we'll get into this in a minute, but I think a large part of that is just some basic understanding of what each other's functions are in the business and having a little bit of respect and maybe even a little bit of sympathy for what each of us is doing. So what's broken? I mentioned there's a persistent culture of us versus them. Ever hear this in a project meeting, a company meeting, any kind of a meeting with the field staff? A project manager ever said that to anybody here? Probably not, right? How about this one? Anybody ever been called a bean counter by a superintendent? This is, I'm painting with a fairly broad brush here, I understand that, but I've been in the room when that was said. That's a direct quote. So that's what we're dealing with here. You've got a group of professionals in the field that are exceedingly competent and by the way, also good at math. So we're talking about two people who have very similar skill sets here, but often are kind of talking past each other for one reason or another. Arguably their goals are aligned, but still this culture exists, right? So let's talk about some symptoms. I've got some things I'm going to pop up here, but I'd like to hear from you if I may. What are some symptoms that you feel in your business that you have experienced in the past or maybe currently experiencing that would indicate that you have a problem with, the accounting and finance functions not really playing nicely with the operations functions? Just shout it out, anybody. Beg your pardon? Ignore emails. Okay, that's a good one. Anything else? I know you know. I'm going to start calling on people if I don't hear anybody. Ma'am, you were nodding a minute ago about the bean counter thing. What have you experienced that you seem to know?
It's like they don't trust the numbers. They don't think that you've entered it correctly, or
right. Yeah, they don't trust. Yeah, they don't trust the numbers. They don't trust the math, whatever that happens to be. How many different ways are there to add 1 + 1, right? So here's a couple of things that we feel in the business when we know we're not aligned. We've got differently frustration. Project profitability, these are literal business problems. Project profitability is not predictable. That's like the worst thing ever, right? Maybe you have subcontractor defaults. Again, these are global symptoms of if the project teams, your delivery teams, and finance aren't talking about the same thing, they're not singing off the same sheet of music. Profitable right up until the end. We love that when that happens, right? Has that ever happened? Everything is great, and then it isn't. Like in the last, we're closing the job out. Holy shit, we didn't make any money. Where did all that profit go? Well, I spent it, I guess. I don't know. So that was a big miss. Somebody wasn't asking good questions, or maybe there was a system issue, perhaps, I don't know. Chronic cash flow problems. Another reason why maybe if accounting and finance or accounting and operations aren't hand in glove. Toxic culture. So that's maybe not as quantifiable as some other things. That kind of feels like frustration, right? Project managers trying to hide money. That's a favorite, right? We used to have a thing. I was taught this. I was a young APM wannabe project manager. And I was told when you have a little honeypot of money, put it in the elevator code or the escalator code. And I said, well, but our building doesn't have an escalator. And the answer was, they don't look at it that closely anyway. Something else would be, if I give you, see, here's the thing. Project management, operations people, actually I'm going to they don't understand, they never took an accounting class, or it's probably likely they did not. I want to say never, it's maybe too broad generalization. They probably did not take an accounting class. And even if they did, and we all know this, a lot of our field and craft labor did not go to college, which is totally fine. And if they did, chances are they probably didn't take an accounting class. And even if that's true, my partner, Greg, he was advertised as being here today. He couldn't be here. Something came up. His background is he was a CFO of a demo and civil company for about 10 years. And we were talking about this. And he said, you don't learn project accounting in school, not in undergrad and not when you get your MBA. They don't teach it. You learn it in the field. Experience is kind of a tough teacher. You get the pain and then the lesson comes second. If you didn't learn it in school, they certainly didn't understand it and learn it at school. That's actually a point we could actually maybe build off of, right? Persistent underbillings. This kind of goes back to chronic cash flow problems, right? Actually, that's directly related, as a matter of fact. Surprise write-downs, that's that it was great right up until the end. And then just that friction, right? That just kind of touches on the frustration we talked about. Missing receipts. I know there's a couple of vendors here that do expenses and things like that out there. Nobody loses receipts. Let's talk about some places where can we go to look to find this misalignment? We've got these problems, right? We know that we're frustrated. We know that we're experiencing it emotionally. We absolutely know that. Let's talk about some places to go look. Do you have silos in the business? Probably. If you have all of those chronic problems, then you probably have silos in the business. Finance is one thing. Project management and operations is an entirely different thing. And I don't even get into whether estimating and operations talk. That's a whole different ballgame. So do you have consistent processes? Show of hands in the room. Who here has documented? Have you done work in your business to have consistent documented processes? Yes, I see some hands over here. A smattering. Good. That's good. That's good. That's one way. That's a step in the right direction. I mentioned before, if you've got two different business units, finance and operations, that are obviously supposed to be chugging in the same direction, but maybe aren't for any reason, not knowing necessarily what happens to that invoice that I just approved after I put my little scribble on it, not having any idea what happens to that after that, might be a place to go look. So when accounting calls the project manager and complains, I don't have these invoices, I need these invoices, we're closing the books tomorrow, and the project manager's like, closing the books means nothing to me. I've got to pour concrete tomorrow. It means absolutely nothing to me. Why is that even important? Also, clear lines of authority and responsibility. So job descriptions, roles and responsibilities that go right hand in hand with repeatable processes. Knowing who's doing what, when are they doing it? There's some why in there. Why are they doing it that way? What works for your company may not work exactly the same way for your company for lots of very valid reasons. So a couple of questions. Do you have clarity in P&L responsibility for the project? Show of hands. Who is P&L responsible for your project? Project manager? Show of hands. What about the superintendent? Okay. What about everybody? Everybody's responsible for profit. Who says that? So if everybody's doing it, probably nobody's doing it, right? Having clear lines of understanding let me just put it this way. My personal belief, it should be the project manager. That's how I was trained. I treated it like it was my little fiefdom, my little company. That's what when we're with clients and we're talking about it that way, that's how we present it, which sometimes is a big lift for companies. They're not used to thinking like that. But I've got a lot of experience that tells me it's a best practice or a laudable goal. If you don't have clear understanding of who's responsible for the profit of the project, well, your project manager, your superintendent aren't going to feel any responsibility whatsoever, whether you think they do or not. It may be that you think they do, but you didn't tell them they did. Or maybe you think they do, you told them they did, but you didn't train them to have the skills to be responsible for it. That's also possible. I mentioned defined processes, procedures, specifically accounts payable that includes the project management staff. Lots, that's good. So if I could give a couple people, how do you go about that? Are we doing that? Are we manually handling that still? Are we using one of our new fancy software workflows? Which
automation software.
perfect, great. Anybody still doing it manually? Okay. There's one in the back still doing it manually. How's that feel, by the way? Heavy, it feels heavy. We have clients today, right now, that, and I know just beyond clients I've talked to other people who experience the same thing in our industry, that the project manager or the superintendent who's ever out on that site never sees an invoice. It just comes through the mail slot, AP pays it. They have no idea if that material was even delivered. They have no idea if it was shorted or not. They just pay it, which I think is ludicrous, but it happens. I'm here to tell you that's not the right way to do it. Most of I think you understand that, but there are better ways to go about that. Mentioned before, understanding your role in that process. So I'm going to put some process maps up on the screen here to give you some examples of some things we've done in the past. So let's talk about AR for a minute. Who prepares? I know we've got some subcontractors, some general contractors in here. So who prepares the monthly pay app? Project manager? What about APAR, accounting? Anybody in the room have accounting do it? Okay. How does that, do you feel like it's an accurate representation of what's happening in the field?
Yes and no. When it's done from the field, it is, but it gets overlooked a lot as far as the making sure we have like daily field reports that are done.
Right.
If the totals aren't right.
Right, so it could depend on your contract, right? Is it a T&M contract or is it a lump sum? What's my billing? How do I bill? Am I billing on time and material, or not time and material, excuse me, cost plus? Are you billing on cost plus? Well, it's probably pretty darn accurate. It came out of accounting, right? But if it's coming out of, or if you're billing on a percent complete basis, checking against the cost is pretty good, but I'm here to tell you that I can convince an owner's rep or an architect to let me bill 40% when it's only 30% complete. And a lot of people can do that. And therefore we have a little bit better cash flow, et cetera. So the two things probably might be a good idea if they talked, right? Collection, so spinning off of accounts receivable. Who's responsible for getting paid? You've submitted the bill. Who's calling and making sure that the check came in? Who's responsible for that? Anybody? Project manager. I like those answers. How many here is it AR? Is it the accounting calling, asking when are we going to get paid? I know one right here, a couple here. Oh, collections department.
So they do it and then they call the PM if they need help.
I like that solution, by the way. I think that's a nice compromise. As long as the project manager has an understanding that they are ultimately responsible or accountable, maybe is a better way to say that, they're ultimately accountable for it.
To begin with, you're dealing, I'm a subcontractor, so I'm dealing with the general contractor's accounting department.
Oh, sure, yeah.
You don't want your PM calling the accounting department at GC.
No.
Because you go talk to the PM, he's going to say, well, my accounting department's got it. So until there's a problem, accounting to accounting works.
Yeah. I would argue that the general contractor's project manager ought to have a really good understanding of when exactly they're going to get paid, and they ought to be able to tell their superintendent, or excuse me, their subcontract and trade partners exactly where that is and when they can expect to be paid. And if it's past due, they ought to know why. They ought to be very involved. So consistent processes. I mentioned I was going to show you some. Process maps. So these are just some examples of some process maps that we've done with clients in the past. Just I picked a couple: accounts receivable, payable for a vendor invoice, payroll, and I can't read what that other one says. I think that's for like just random invoices. Subcontractor pay applications, and then just regular accounts. So the point is, we color code these. So I can tell you, green is always accounting, by the way, because it's the color of money. Blue is generally project management, and the other colors kind of rotate sometimes. But we always, green is always the accounting department. The purpose of showing you this is, when I asked before who has documented processes for their workflows, does it look like this would be the question. Yes, no? Some of you over here I saw raise your hand. Can I get another yay, yes, no, nod head? Yep, got a thumbs up. Good. It should be this simple. Some of us grew up in a time when SOPs were like a 4-ring binder that weighed like 50 pounds, and we had to read it. I mean, forget it. I happen to be a visual learner to begin with, so I like these just because that's how I learn. But this is a much better method to use. Think about onboarding. If you're able, you need to make sure you can help a project manager understand what his responsibilities are. Let's say that you have an expectation your project manager is responsible for putting the pay app together, consulting with accounting to make sure the cost is right, submitting the bill, making sure the collections are happening, all those good things. But he didn't do that where you hired him from. County did all of that. That guy's going to struggle, at least for a little while, especially if you don't tell him, if you just assume he knows. Okay, so also, where do you have clarity? So I mentioned this before. Do PMs have a role in any of these? Does the PM have a role in any of these activities? I say they do. Now, the level to which they do is 100% your decision inside your company. There are best practices, but the way, the size of your business, the complexity of how you bill, those things do bear thought about how you structure that. In the room, do project managers have good access to so let's say they do have they are responsible. They have P&L responsibility. They have a hand in approving invoices and getting bills out the door to your client, whether it be a GC or the owner. Do they have adequate access to the data? So how many in the room are using some version of, maybe it's Procore or maybe it's a fully functioning ERP that has a project management piece to it, functionality? Just show of hands. Who in the room would think that their PMs do not have good access to data like that? Or do you want them to have access to it? Anybody think that they shouldn't have access to it? Can we agree they probably shouldn't be messing around inside the ERP proper? That we could agree on, right? They don't want to either, by the by. We have had clients that it's frightening, but you've got accounting and they're doing their thing. This particular client I'm thinking of was on QuickBooks. They were actually in the process of transitioning to an ERP, but their prior processes were built around QuickBooks. And their project managers were going in there and doing stuff. The controller, she couldn't sleep at night. I mean, she was an absolute wreck. She spent most of her time cleaning up, going back behind people all the time. Even if they hadn't done something wrong, she didn't trust they weren't going to accidentally do something. I go back to project managers aren't accountants, but they can be trained, they can be taught how to think like you do and the things that are important to you so that you guys can, word I like to use is jihad. Anybody know the word jihad? It's kind of a country thing. Just means get together, work well, gears match. Where else can we look? How are we measuring success? So we talked about places to look if we don't think we have alignment or we're misaligned. We know we have these frustrations in a business. You have a siloed business. Maybe everything isn't aligned the way it should be. Another place to look would be, how are we measuring success? Does the business or are the business and the project goals aligned? So, a really easy one is profit. There's a lot of others, but let's just talk about profit. That's the most obvious one, of course. Does your project management staff know that? It seems like a simple question, but maybe they don't. This goes back to P&L responsibility a little bit. When I was early in my career, we used to get handed a folder. This was at Beers. They would hand us a folder at the beginning of the job and say, we hard bid everything in the group I was in. And they would hand us a folder and say, bid day fee was 2.5%. We expect you to get 5 at the end of the job. And my job was to figure that out. I was 24 years old, like I knew what I was doing. And I pissed off a lot of subs doing it in the process, but that's how they did it. They just said, that's the bid day fee, figure it out. I didn't even, quite frankly, at that point in my career, I did not understand the simple calculation of contract is the same thing as revenue minus cost equals profit. I didn't even know that. Conceptually, of course, if somebody had said that, I would have got it, but that's just not how it was done. So I tell that story to say that don't take it for granted that they know what you mean when you say profit. So let's talk about a couple of KPIs. I've got a couple of screenshots up here of some of you are using these things. Acumatica was up there. There's a Procore in there. I'm pretty sure there's a Procore. There's a Oracle up there. I throw this up here for this reason. A lot of people today are using dashboards. They have a very sophisticated systems to measure way more than just profit. You guys, from a finance standpoint, have a lot of incremental KPIs that you can measure that you get really good at reading the numbers and understanding overbillings and underbillings as just as an example. Figuring out where the project is and is it healthy. To your project manager in the field, you looking at an over and under billing and telling them that they're in trouble is like sorcery. They don't understand why you know that. They have no idea. Trust me, I didn't. And I know clients today that I could name that don't either. They do now, but when we asked them about it, they didn't. So it's still existing. So the point to this is, I mentioned before, aligning business goals with project level goals is the key. Profit's obviously an easy one, but you could set KPIs for safety, for quality. You can tie all of those things to dollars and cents eventually, one way or the other. Sometimes it's a little tenuous, I'll grant that. But I'm going to get into a minute here. We're going to talk about what does a project manager think about on a daily basis, and we can do that exercise. Okay, communication. So everybody, well, I say everybody. I'm assuming everybody or most everybody in the room was here this morning and saw, is his name Anthony, the keynote guy this morning? He was really good, by the way. I want to do a call back to him because he was talking about communication. It was actually awesome because I'm sitting in the back of the room going, this is exactly what I want to say. Do you think that you and operations speak the same language? Show of hands. Everybody speaks English, sure, yeah. Do you feel like you have the same definitions of the same words? I got $5 in my pocket that says maybe not. So we're going to play a game really quickly. I'm going to show you a couple different examples here just to prove the point. I'm going to call on a few people. The word brick. Describe that for me, please. Describe a brick. Give me, it's not word association. I need you to describe it. Yes, sir. Yes. I'm sorry. What is a brick?
It's a form of stone.
Okay, that's good. That works. Anybody else got a different definition of brick?
A charging cord.
Okay, I love that one. That's a good one. If it's a block, that you charge your phone or whatever into. Anybody else got a different one?
It's a bad basketball shot.
Bingo, man. There's my basketball guy. I'm always waiting on that guy. Yes.
Going from the run to the bike and.
Oh, that's a great one. In a try, yeah, you brick your, yes. Oh, that you know what? I'm going to add that one. That's a new one for me. I knew that, but that's a good one. So, do what? A dead iPhone. That's a great one. Some of us remember those. The brick phone, the original brick phone. There's your basketball shot. There's a Lego brick. That's a little different kind of a brick. It's more like what we think a brick would be by its pure definition. And then there's your pure brick. But I could go on and on about this. As an operations guy, I would say, is that a queen size or a jumbo? I can tell it's not tumbled. I think it's got grog in it. I could go on and on about describing that brick. And all the accountants and the finance people in the room are like, who gives a crap about a brick and grog? I don't even know what that is. And what's tumbled, right? So now we're going to play a different game. Now we're going to talk about something that you like to talk about. Let's define profit. Now my point I'm going to make here is there's a lot of different ways to define different words. Man, these are really small. I apologize. I thought they were bigger than that. So they're just going to throw up here. We've got free cash flow. Bottom line, also used to define profit. Net income, profit margin. Now some of these, granted, some of these are maybe more real estate oriented than pure construction, but you get my drift. Or maybe some of them are finance-based. When I say finance, I mean like mergers and acquisitions. EBITDA, everybody loves to talk about that one. Gross margin, taxable income, earnings. All of these things in one context or another could define profit given the right industry or circumstance, right? Every single one of them. And I've heard at least half of those mentioned as the term profit talking to me about my project in a trailer in my past, especially the EBITDA one. Are you kidding me? It's got nothing to do with project profit, but I've heard it, I swear to God. This goes back to what I was saying before, and this, this is just a personal moment. I felt stupid sitting in that room. My goal for this talk overall generally is to say that maybe this is a form of empathy, but remember that the project managers and the superintendents that you work with that are on your team, I said this in the beginning, are very competent people. They can do things you can't do, you don't know anything about, don't care about maybe even. The same goes for them. They don't really care about this stuff, but they should, is the important thing. That's the difference. I don't think you need to necessarily know whether a brick has grog in it, or if it's tumbled, or what is the specific structural components of this building? Is it steel or concrete? But they probably ought to know the definition of this. So here's one last one, mud, just for fun. Mud can have a lot of different definitions. There's just literal mud, kind you walk in and it's wet, dirt gets wet. Some people call concrete mud. When's the mud coming? And other people call drywall compound mud. So the point here is it happens on both sides of the equation. We have lots of meanings for the same words, and I know what I'm talking about. Do you? This happened literally to a client, with us and a client the other day. Embarrassing to say that we've been talking past each other for a solid 3 months until yesterday we had a breakthrough. We were trying to walk through their P&L and understand why their COGS looked the way they did, and they couldn't explain it to us, so we kept having to ask. And we were using the same words over and over again, and we finally went, let's just come at this completely from a different angle. And sure enough, we figured it out. We were not saying the same thing. So what it looks like to be a PM. On a daily basis, your PM should be thinking about everything on that list. Maybe not like hard thought, but this is stuff they do on a daily basis. Maybe not billings every single day, but they are thinking or should be thinking about this stuff all the time. And I could tie every one of those back to the profit on the project in one way or the other, every single one of them. Those are risks that you think of. Some of these things you think about as risks to your business. Not on a daily basis, but you should understand that they're risks to your business. And you've got a PM out there managing them. So it'd be a really good idea if you guys had an understanding or had an agreement between you two. Do these mean the same thing to us? And what am I thinking about? What does risk mean to me when I talk about logistics? Probably not a lot. Maybe that's not a great example. Billings is a big one. And how do they understand? Do they understand this as a project profitability and how it's related to the company? So I had AI draw something. This was kind of fun. I decided to throw this little graphic up here. On the left is everything you saw listed there just a minute ago. In blue, so we have our nice little construction guy, operations guy on the left, and our nice accountant here on the right. When I had AI draw these first, they were both frowning, by the way. I just asked it to draw me a cartoon of a construction worker and accountant. And they were both frowning, interestingly enough. So I had to tell it, make them smile, for goodness sakes. The point of this is the blue things are things where you have very common interests: budget management, billings, collections, cost management, profit forecasting. Tangentially, manpower may be something you're concerned about from an accounting standpoint. Finance, schedule, probably, because it's tied to cash flow and profit fade, perhaps. Trade partner performance, you don't want subs going out on you if you're self-insuring or if you're using SDI, or perhaps have a bond that costs you money and you definitely don't want to get in trouble with your bonding company. And then, of course, there's things that you guys are thinking about that maybe they are or not. WIP reports, cutoff, monthly close, bank reconcile, credit card reconcile. You can see that of everything listed up there, half of them you have common interest in on a daily basis. So how can we fix this, right? I've mentioned it a couple of times. Training is the key here. You could do that in monthly project reviews, monthly health checks. Show of hands, who does a monthly project review with each of your projects? Not enough. But maybe that's everybody that's project-based or a construction company. When you're in those meetings, do you think your project manager, if you say the word WIP, what kind of faces do they make? Or do they even know what you're talking about? Is that even something you've talked about? They have one very important goal or one very important part of that WIP, and that's your forecasted cost. And you trying to guess at that is kind of a mistake. You probably ought to ask them about it or at least quiz them on it. And in the process, you could teach them some things. This is what I'm getting at, is this is a perfect opportunity on a monthly basis to incrementally. Also, continuous improvement. Who is familiar with PDCA? It's an old quality management process acronym. Thank you. It stands for Plan, Do, Check, Act. Make a plan, do the plan, build yourself an off-ramp to check to see how you're doing. Adjust means act or adjust. It could be both. So continuous improvement. Take a look at these processes that you have in place and recognize where you have problems. Pull a team together to fix it. Recognize what's going wrong and fix it. And set up a process that you can measure progress, step off the highway for a minute, look and say, what are we measuring? Did we get it right? Choosing a KPI of what color shirt Jeff wears every Tuesday is not a good indication of success. But you'd be surprised. Sometimes you will pick a KPI. You think, this is going to tell us what we want to know. And you're going along, and suddenly you've got to stop every now and go, okay, we've collected a lot of data. Does this tell us anything? Crap, we're measuring the wrong thing. Clear communication, we talked about this, the why. If I could implore anything on you, your project managers, superintendents, they really do at the end of the day. They want to know why. Repeatable, consistently applied processes, very important. And that common language, we talked about that. So I promised the top 5 things. So those of us that are old enough to remember Letterman's old list, I did it in blue with yellow writing, kind of looks, that's as old as I can make it look. What don't they understand? The contract. You might be surprised to learn that your project managers haven't read the contract. I'm talking about the prime contract or maybe subcontract in this gentleman's case. In the room, your project managers read the contract, they understand it? Not enough. There's a lot of stuff in there. There's a lot of risk in that contract. Your project managers better understand it. I would recommend that you guys read it as well, but there's a lot to be learned in the contract about billing terms, liquidated damages, entitlements, things that are risk to your business. What else? They may or may not understand pre-qualification. Show of hands in the room, who goes through or runs a pre-qualification process due to sub-default insurance or just any regular risk management. Again, speaking as a former project manager, when they rolled this out, SDI kind of became a thing, 15 years ago maybe, something like that? We didn't have any idea what we were doing. I know today there are project managers that have no understanding. They don't need a finance degree to understand some basic ratios. And I don't think it's okay. You don't need to have them reviewing financials either, but they should understand what the red flags are for a sub that is about to default. There are red flags. We see them all the time. Does your PM know what they are? If he saw it, would he know it? Ultimately, I think you'd want your project manager to think like you in terms of risk. Think like a CFO. Do I want to take a risk on this subcontractor? He's 10% low from his other bidders. I've never met him. I don't know, there could be a couple other things that make me wonder. Yeah, they won't bill you for some reason. I would like to pay you, just bill me. What is it, your project managers, your field team should understand. What do you do if you're about to face default? I'm going to run through the last of these really quickly. I'm running out of time. Forecasting accurately. Again, this is your project manager's responsibility. Do they understand how to do that? I mentioned before, a bunch of savings shows up all of a sudden, or because they've been hiding that money. And they're looking for praise too. At the very end of the job, they're like, what? I made a bunch of extra money. Why are you mad about that? Well, let me explain a few things to you. It would have been better if we worked together on that. And here's why. Your PM really ought to understand how a dollar flows through the business, conceptually, high level. And we mentioned before, do they understand your WIP reporting? I'm not going to get into this. You know how to forecast. I assume you all know how to forecast. PMs struggle with this. I don't understand it sometimes, but they do. It's a pretty basic process and thought experiment, but your project managers, as a broad brush general rule, have a struggle with this a little bit. They don't understand how they could do that. The WIP report, we mentioned that. They don't understand that curve. They've never been shown it, or probably not seen it before. The basic S curve for sure, and definitely not all the gradations where your retainage is getting cut back and where your cost hits against that curve, or your billings rather against the cost curve. And the last thing, and I'll end here. You are not the enemy. This is what they don't seem to understand. And I would ask that you recognize that your operations team is not the enemy either. You guys are on the same team. We all objectively know this. My request is that hopefully some of the things I've pointed out today, you recognize them in your company as a problem and know that you can fix them. They are fixable. It's going to require a little bit of effort. It's going to require some structure, some training, understanding your own processes a little bit, maybe getting outside some comfort zones. And it doesn't happen magically overnight either. However, I am here to tell you that when it works really, really, really well. And it makes your job a little easier.